Why do I love you? I love you not only for what you are, but for what I am when I'm with you. I love you not only for what you have made of yourself, but for what you are making of me. I love you for ignoring the possibilities of the fool in me, and for accepting the possibilities of the good in me. Why do I love you? I love you for closing your eyes to the discords in me, and for adding to the music in me my worshipful singing. I love you for helping me to construct of my life not a tavern but a temple. I love you because you have done so much to make me happy. You have done it without a word, without a touch, without a sign. You have done it by just being yourself. Perhaps after all, that is what the Neon Crew podcast means, and that is why I love you.
Was that in one of the two films?
That was in, I think, the end monologue of Behind the Candelabra.
Yes. I forgot. That's his. Yeah, he's talking to Scott Thorson.
Yeah, that's his like farewell before he floats up. Not to spoil Behind the Candelabra. It's very vague.
We haven't said anything about what occurs.
That is true, and plus it is a real life thing that happened. Not him flying in the sky, but just the events of the film overall.
Yeah.
I was trying to do my best Michael Douglas playing Liberace impersonation.
Impossible.
It's very impossible, and at one point I thought, should I just try to impersonate an old woman? Because that seems to be sort of what he's doing in the movie, right?
Yeah, he's kind of. It's like
I think he calls himself like an old biddy a few times.
He's an old queen.
Yeah. Well, that's what Scott calls him too.
Everyone, it was just it was thrown about. The language is thrown about in the film for everyone.
Everyone's aware of like this guy should have been born in the body of like a 75-year-old woman.
Yeah.
Like just this very, very old, haughty gal. Welcome everybody to episode 88 of the Neon Crew podcast. My name's Kyle.
I'm Mac.
We've got a spicy episode for you. Very sassy, very gay, very just kind of musically inclined.
Yeah.
Biopic sort of centric episode.
It's very true.
Yeah.
And two different tones.
I'll give you a bonus point if you can tell me what these two movies have in common. Besides the fact that they're biopics of musicians. There's one very specific thing.
In both of them?
In both of these films. I want to see if you can get it.
I don't know if I will be able to.
Do you want me to tell you?
Yes.
In both of these films, at one point, Boyd Holbrook shows up and stirs some shit.
Oh, dude, I even said it to him behind the... Oh, I'm so upset. He popped up behind the Candelabra. I was like, oh, it's like our boy's in this.
Yeah. Our guy who's a dude.
Yeah.
I would so confidently say.
I do enjoy...
If not, he's on his way.
I mean, from Narcos, and he was like one of the better parts in the Bike Riders.
That is true. I did like him in the Bike Riders.
He has had some stuff where he's in Logan. Have you seen Logan?
Yeah, he's the bad guy in Logan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I watched those movies before we talked about Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, got my fix of Wolverine trilogy.
Stirring the pot.
One of the strangest trilogies of all time. But yeah, Boyd Holbrook shows up in each of these movies and starts some shit.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I guess he does them both. Yeah.
Not as much in A Complete Unknown, but his effect is still felt.
It is. I mean, he does inspire me to some extent, but there's some liberties taken in A Complete Unknown, but we'll get to it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of A Complete Unknown, guess what we get to talk about before we dive into our movie discussions?
Oscars?
We got the Oscar nominations. Dun da da da.
I don't know. Yeah.
Dun da da da. Dun da 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 da. I don't know what theme song I'm doing, but it's a good prelude into us going over the Oscar nominations for 2025. Oscars take place March 2nd.
Yeah.
I figured we could do what we've always done. We just kind of go through the categories, get our thoughts. Obviously, we'll maybe skip some of the ones that we're not familiar with or don't really
the top, like the big
pertain.
five.
The big five?
Yeah.
Oh, we can easily get through like a lot of the major ones. So
It's
like,
just reading them off, though.
okay, so which 5 are you thinking of then? If
The
you
big 5? Best picture, best director, best female lead, best male lead. Is that 4?
That's 4.
Ooh, it's both screenplays.
So you don't want to talk about like cinematography or like visual effects or animated film?
Nah, I mean, it's just we always just read it off of the list. I always feel like it's a lot of reading.
Do we just want to talk about best picture then?
We're going to do that in 2 episodes. An episode? 2 episodes.
Probably 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Well, I can just list them off and then we can give our baseline thoughts, I guess. So best picture for 2025, in alphabetical order, we've got Anora, The Brutalist, A Complete Unknown, a movie we're going to talk about this episode. Yeah. Conclave, Dune Part 2, Amelia Perez, I'm Still Here, Nickel Boys, The Substance, and Wicked.
Yeah.
Those are the 10 best picture nominees.
Kind of a unique year. I think this is another one like
pretty unique, yeah.
There's solid films. I don't know. I'm sure there's a front runner.
I think I'm more of a fan overall of this year's selection than I was last year's. Not to say that last year's was bad necessarily, just that I feel like I connected with these movies overall more.
These are, I think, a little bit more unique with their stories and the storytelling than last year's. Like last year was a very heaping handful of big budget movies, kind of higher concept films, I want to say. Like, I don't know. You had Barbie, you had Oppenheimer, American Fiction, and then like, you sneak in Past Lives and Anatomy of a Fall. Like there was a couple of the darlings in there.
Yeah.
Where I not to say that these all feel like darlings, but these are all very unique films.
Yeah, most of these are pretty like mid to small budget movies.
Because even
that are like feel very personal.
Yeah, like I would say Dune Part 2 and Wicked are probably your 2 big budget made for the audiences. But even those 2 are unique in their own rights. One being a Broadway play and the other being
a high concept sci-fi based on a novel type of thing. Very unique lineup this year. I'll touch on best director since I think that's worth touching on.
Yeah.
So
of course,
for directing, we've got Jacques Audiard for Amelia Perez, Sean Baker for Anora, Brady Corbett, shout out to our boy from Funny Games, for The Brutalist, Carolee Fargeet for The Substance, and James Mangold for A Complete Unknown.
Yeah.
Interesting that Denis did not get a nomination.
I know, because all this other stuff is in the runnings.
Yeah.
Like usually you feel like the movies that have the big nominated for 7 other categories, the guy's gonna get a best director nod. If you had to take one out,
I would take out Jacques Audiard, Amelia Perez. I would switch that out.
That's
for Dune.
so interesting because I'd leave him in there, but I don't. I've also heard people aren't up in arms about it. Obviously, there's gonna be 2 sides of the aisle with this one. There isn't much of a middle ground,
right?
But I have also heard the LGBTQ community feels a little insulted by somewhat kind of how he handled.
They're a bit mixed on Amelia Perez as a film. If I weren't picking that one, I would pick James Mangold.
Okay,
just because the directing of that movie is not what I like about that.
That's what to say. Oh, liked, he said.
Well,
tipping his cap,
grain of salt.
Hand.
Grain of salt. We'll talk about it in a few minutes here.
Yes.
But yeah, out of
he
those
was the one
2,
that
I would switch them.
I would have taken him out because I mean, it's Bob Dylan and it's kind of cut and dry.
Right.
Yeah, I think you could only fuck up that movie. You know what I'm saying?
Shall we do actor and actresses?
Yeah, because I was also going through the noms earlier today, and I haven't built it into memory.
Actor in a leading role: Adrian Brody, The Brutalist.
Okay.
Timothée Chalamet for A Complete Unknown.
Yeah.
Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing.
Yeah.
Ray Fiennes for Conclave, and Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice. Not that I expect Ralph Fiennes to win. I'm happy to see him on the list.
Conclave will be watched shortly.
He's one of my favorite parts of that movie by far.
Yeah, I've heard. I mean, from the small bit I've heard that I think it goes down smooth and it's more interesting than you would have guessed.
I think you personally will really enjoy Conclave.
I have a feeling I will because I'm kind of hitting on the history side of things and how things are done.
I think the favorite to win is Adrian Brody.
Interesting.
I don't think people would be terribly surprised if Timothee won.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. I don't think I would either. The ones I'm unfamiliar with, Coleman Domingo for Sing Sing, which I've heard he's great in, and then Sebastian Stan for The Apprentice. Kind of weirdly surprising that he's nominated, considering that it's for him playing
Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump.
I gotta see that one because I think didn't it get? Is it a screenplay that it got nominated for? I thought you got another nom in there somewhere, but
I can check.
Yeah, I heard about this film a couple months ago on like Anticipated Films Watch, and it never brush up on anything that I'm currently.
I don't see it for original or adapted screenplay.
Then maybe it didn't get. I can't imagine it got hit anywhere else unless it's costume design.
Unless it's like makeup.
Feels like
which it's not.
Yeah.
A different Sebastian Stan got nominated for makeup and hairstyling, but that was a different man. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't see The Apprentice anywhere else on here, so I'd imagine that's the only one that it's managed to nab.
Well,
or did Jeremy Strong get supporting? I guess we can find out.
From Succession.
Yeah. Because he's in The Apprentice too.
Yeah, does he play Roy Khan?
Yeah.
You know, so it's so funny that we talk about like I keep bringing up the American Prometheus book, and I have to imagine, and I could be off. Senator McCarthy, who led McCarthyism and wanted to do a public smearing of the Communist Party affiliates. You know, he blacklisted people, and It's kind of funny because there's like what happened in the public image with McCarthyism and what he was doing, and then behind closed doors, like what happened to Oppenheimer, and they had the House of Un-American Activities Committee that was going through and finding people. That was very like, we're doing this behind closed doors, but bigger implications with who we're finding. Roy Khan was McCarthy's aide.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I'm like sitting there, and now I'm like, supposedly he's the one that groomed Trump, right? So now, like I read that, and I was like, no way. Now I'm really into like, kind of want to see The Apprentice because I want to see if that's if it's the same guy. And then like you got to think like McCarthyism going on. This guy's showing you how to do all this stuff in a political format, and then you find out that this guy's a part of it, and he's the one that groomed Trump. Like I'm very interested.
Damn, it all ties together.
It's fascinating.
Actress in a leading role, we've got Cynthia Erivo for Wicked.
She was nice.
Carla Sofia Gascon for Amelia Perez.
I'm actually kind of rooting for her.
First transgender person nominated for, I think, an acting nom in general, right? Or is it just...
Could be. I'd have to read up imagine.
On that. Mikey Madison for Honora. Love to see it.
Gotta see that.
Demi Moore for The Substance. Love to see that. Fernanda Torres, I'm Still Here, the only one I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, we'll get brushed up with her shortly.
You know, not to like give my hand away for Amelia Perez immediately. There's a lot of things that I have issues with that movie.
I think a lot of people do. And it's not
her performance is definitely not one of them. I
thought she was really good.
I think there's a lot to be said about like the fact that she's getting recognized despite how a lot of people feel about that movie.
That I'm telling you, that movie's got people torn. I saw it, and you know, it was different. I will say, I think I enjoyed watching it. Me and Jasmine watched it together, and I didn't have too many qualms with it. It's very different, and you know, I will say though, the music takes you out of the film.
I am so excited to talk about that movie when the time comes.
Dude, I'm telling you right now, I had no idea what I thought it was like. So I read on Netflix, it's got the description of it. You know, it doesn't say fucking musical, and it's, this lawyer or whatever is working with a drug kingpin, a sicario, if you will, to get them out of the drug life and into a normal life or whatever it is. Like, that's a description on Netflix. I was like,
yeah,
oh yeah, like, here we go. Like, this is gonna have like some political dealings. It's a thriller drama, like, sweet. And like a fucking song pops up 5 minutes into the film.
It's like the first 3 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Zoe Saldana's
right out of the gate.
She's on a laptop and all of a sudden they're in the street singing. I'm like, okay, that's kind of odd. Like,
right.
Maybe that's just like the one thing. Like, maybe that's kind of like that. The movie, and all of a sudden they just keep doing it. Some of the songs are kind of funny though. Like, listen to, like, if you pay attention to the lyrics.
Oh, they're pretty funny.
Yeah. Like, some of them are really, but the movie is,
it's a mixed bag.
Yes.
It's a bit of a mixed bag.
Which we'll talk about when we get to it.
Yes. Actor in a supporting role. Yura Borisov for Honora. Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown. Guy Pearce for The Brutalist. And Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice.
There it is.
So he did get in there.
He did.
Kieran Culkin, after seeing A Real Pain, I'm kind of rooting for him to get it. Yeah, not that I thought Edward Norton was bad. It's just I feel like Kieran is so much a part of A Real Pain that him being nominated for supporting actor is like...
I feel like, and I haven't seen A Real Pain. Is that Eisenberg in it too?
It's Eisenberg, yeah.
But I feel like
it's kind of odd though because it's like a two-hander.
That's what I'm saying. Like those movies where it's like, all right, you've got a good amount of screen time. Like, I get you get the nod, but you got a good amount of the screen time.
Yeah.
And like they're traveling together, so I can't imagine there's a whole lot of scenes that
like the movie is those two.
Yeah, that's what, I'm trying to think. It's like a buddy, not to say it's buddy. I know I kind of loosely know what the story's about, but like traveling companions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's hard to say one over the other.
I think Guy Pearce has this.
I know. I want to see The Brutalist just for him.
Yeah.
I've heard he's humorous with some of his antics, but
imagine like the most stubborn bulldog you've ever met turned into a human being, and that's Guy Pearce in The Brutalist.
I've heard that he's very fun in it.
He is a time. Actress in a supporting role, and then if there's any other category we maybe want to talk about, or is this the last one?
We could be good after that.
Okay.
I kind of want to do the screenplays.
We'll do the screenplays
because I know you're a writer, and I'm really involving myself more into the stories and stuff. I think screenplays actually need to hold more weight with the Academy because, like,
I agree.
All of the films are based on screenplays.
Actress in a supporting role: Monica Barbaro for A Complete Unknown, Ariana Grande for Wicked, Felicity Jones for The Brutalist, not The Brutalist. That's a different film. Isabella Rossellini for Conclave, and Zoe Saldana for Emilia Perez.
Yeah.
Some interesting choices in here. Ones that I would kind of scratch my head at of them being supporting instead of part of the lead. Saldana, Ariana Grande. Because
once again, a two-hander.
Yeah. Felicity Jones, great in The Brutalist. Isabella Rossellini is the one that makes me scratch my head the most because she's good in Conclave, but she's not in it that much.
Isn't it about like old white guys talking about the church?
Pretty much. And it's awesome. It's so good. It is the most dad-ass movie ever made.
Oh,
and it's all the better for it.
I might be watching this thing tonight.
I think you should.
There might be a chance that nothing's going on. Papa Bear might sit in his recliner.
Writing... adapted screenplay, A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Emilia Perez, Nickel Boys, Sing Sing, and that's it.
No, that's adapted, right?
That's adapted screenplay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sing Sing might actually win it.
See, I still need to see that.
I haven't seen it. I've wanted to, and finding out that it's based on like a real troupe, I want to say, or real events or whatever. I've heard it's
original screenplay.
Yes, here we go.
We've got Honora, the Brutalist, A Real Pain, September 5th, which I think that's the only nomination that movie has.
Yeah,
and The Substance. This is a very strong category.
Substance, and I gotta imagine what was after The Brutalist?
Yeah, I think I would want Anora to win this personally, just because the dialogue in that movie is so good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with the performances, but obviously Sean Baker as a writer-director, is just super fucking talented.
Well, you fall into his pool.
Yeah, I really like the few films of his that I've seen.
Yeah.
He hasn't made that many movies, but when he makes something, it usually hits for me. A Real Pain, also great. The Substance, fucking fantastic. Like, I haven't seen September 5th. Out of the 4 movies I've seen, I wouldn't be unhappy if any of them won.
Right. That's a good mark on the films themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to see what September 5th is. Peter Skarsgård. Oh, it's about Munich. Interesting.
Okay.
Oh, interesting. Okay, this is getting an ad.
So yeah, if you guys are curious about the rest of the categories, I have posted them on Facebook. There's also, Google. You can look up the other categories, find out what you want to know about cinematography, about visual effects, about the music, all this good stuff. Pretty straightforward to find, but
yeah,
I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that stuff come our Oscars episode.
I was about to say it's probably they'll drift in and out probably over the next couple episodes.
Yeah.
We'll
be keeping updates going for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of updates,
okay.
Woody Guthrie had to be updated constantly about what young old Bob Dylan was up to. And
she's here.
Hey, man, I've come here to sing you a song. Hey, I'm Bob Dylan. People lie about who they are. They forget the rest. Of course, we're talking about A Complete Unknown. And since you recommended Behind the Candelabra, I will take this one. So A Complete Unknown, 2024, biographical musical drama film, directed and written by James Mangold, screenplay by him along with Jay Cox, stars Timothee Chalamet as young Bob Dylan, a young Robert Allen Zimmerman, I think is his real name, right? And this film,
Minnesota.
Yeah, this film chronicles sort of the early beginnings of Bob Dylan as a musician, his popularity, and the rise of that sort of type of folk music.
Yeah. It's based on the book Dylan Goes Electric.
Yep.
So it kind of chronicles.
I think that was the original title for this movie too.
They were gonna plug and play.
Yep. Chronicles his rise to fame and the controversy surrounding his switch to electric, as well as his personal relationships with the people in his life, specifically Elle Fanning, who plays Sylvie Russo, and Monica Barrero, who plays Joan Baez. So, spoilers for A Complete Unknown. We will be discussing this movie.
Yeah, there it is. A meteoric rise. That's what I was
That's
thinking.
A good description. Meteoric rise.
Yeah, I was making sure I had it right because I always thought it was a mediocre rise.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I was like, I want to make sure I'm using this term correctly because I've always had it wrong.
So, obviously, a lot of sort of talk about this movie, given Timothée Chalamet's performance in it, how he studied Bob Dylan, learned about his life. I think he actually met with him too at one point because Bob Dylan,
I think he's a producer on this film,
still alive, still trucking along.
I don't know if he's a producer. I heard he was on set or he was helping out.
Sure, they were like, "Hey, Bob, is this the correct way you would like chew bubble gum or whatever?
Is it cool, man?"
Yeah. Do you dig this, brother? But yeah, a lot of talk about Timothy's performance in this movie. Obviously, with I think a lot of musically centric biopics, there's a lot of pressure and ideas about the actor being able to emulate the songs that are sung, emulate the singing voice and the performance and the cadences or whatever. I feel like there's a lot of pressure on that specific thing when it comes to these movies.
I so in the movie, listen to the music, it's like, all right, did they take Bob Dylan's voice? Is this Chalamet singing this stuff? And I don't know, I'm sure whatever they did. But I'm like, all right, you can get him in studio and voice this over while he's singing, you know? So I'm like, there's some pressure, but I don't think it's as much as it was back when you didn't have these capabilities.
I think I read that Timothee used the same voice coach that Austin Butler used for Elvis.
Really?
So I think Timmy, little Tim Tam, did sing and perform the songs himself.
Yeah, he did all of the Boyd Holbrook, him, and then whoever played Joan Baez all sang the
Monica Barbaro.
Yep, all did their own singing.
Yeah,
there's the soundtrack. Because I was actually listening to some Dylan tunes today. They have the Complete Unknown soundtrack voice, sung by all these people. Mm-hmm. I think all the songs are like 2.5 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Movie version, kind of demo tracks.
If you guys don't want the long-winded songs.
You like Bob Dylan, but do you like him like in bite size?
Yeah. A little Walt Whitman sampler of them.
A little tiny finger sandwich.
Yeah.
I think that being said, leading into my thoughts on this movie, the performances are my favorite part. Mm-hmm. I think that it's undeniable how well acted these characters are in this movie.
Oh yeah,
and how well performed they are, both musically and performance wise.
Yes.
I think that is my favorite part of this movie by far.
Okay, we might be heading down two different roads. I agree, though. I thought the performances were outstanding. I mean, it's like...
Yes.
I think Chalamet's getting to a point with his look where it's kind of hard to distinguish himself outside of being Timothée Chalamet. He does a really good job in the song. The performance, I think it's just his look where it's kind of hard to separate him.
You can't like completely scrub the Timmy out of Bob Dylan.
Yeah, I'm like Christian Bale goes and plays the vice president Dick Cheney.
Yeah.
And he does a great job of like, it's not Bale. Like I'm not seeing him, but he also threw on
Gary
80
Oldman
pounds.
Sort of the same way.
Yeah, they can really morph into the look. And like the unfortunate thing though is Chalamet like does look like Dylan though.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like he had nowhere to go. It's like, just grow out your fucking hair, dude.
It's also a factor of Timothée Chalamet is so famous and he has retained that look for a lot of the movies he's been in.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't really changed his look a whole lot. That it becomes sort of undeniable that like, yeah, you can never fully separate this guy from who he's trying to be.
Yeah.
That being said, I think he does a great fucking job.
He was awesome.
And he's it doesn't feel like he's just simply doing an impersonation. Like it does feel like, oh yeah, there's like a person behind the performance that's being brought out. It feels like there's something lived in here with, how he sings and how he carries himself.
The passion that he brings to the movie.
Yeah. And like the sort of the opportunity that James Mangold gives him to sort of like live in some of these scenes.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of times where like the camera's just on him and he's doing his thing and it just lingers for however long.
Yes.
And I think when it sits with him is when this movie is at its best. Right? Like it doesn't feel like
about him.
It doesn't feel like we're being like too frenetically taken away from all this different stuff happening.
Right.
It feels okay to like linger on some of this stuff because like Baz Luhrmann's Elvis is like the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, but you got to give the credit. So I will say it's more props to the director for understanding the tone or the tone of the film. I mean, like, and Elvis was poppy, witty. I mean, he's on fucking coke and amphetamine. So I mean, like,
can't take a shit.
Yeah, like you have to move like that. So he lived such a frenetic life, whereas Dylan in the '60s, especially with the folk music going on, he's like a pacifist.
Oh yeah,
and that's where you should have these long, drawn out moments that are kind of capturing a little bit of the humanity or the spirit that he's exuding, and that's just where he was at with the world. There wasn't anything really, well, one they didn't put in the film, but happening fast in his life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. The big thing that I have going against this film is the time spent living in the shoes of Bob Dylan as a person versus the musical artist and the performer, right?
Interesting.
There's a lot of real estate in this film spent on him singing the songs and him performing.
Oh, yes.
And while I think he does a good job of that, and I think it's portrayed very well, it almost feels like I've watched a concert with Timmy as Bob Dylan instead of watching a movie about his life. Right? Does that make sense?
It does. I had the same qualms about a third of the way through this thing. Because I think they had already played 4 songs, right?
Yeah.
And it's you're thinking to yourself, okay, is this like Bob Dylan jerk session here? Like
right.
Are we just turning this into like almost like a Bob Dylan Goes Live movie, But I think giving the source material and what they were going off of, and really, I mean, it's what he's known for,
Yeah.
It's you have to play it up to that. And I started more enjoying the music and what was going on, because the big thing that I don't think that they really do a good job portraying, and they do it more through like images and events and some of the things, is a lot of his music was always geared. There's a lot of different climates that he was flying to, like whether it was political climate, the racial climate, the civil rights movement going on. You're dealing with poverty. A lot of like what folk music, what you gather through this film is portraying, or what it's supposed to bring out in people, and what it represents, is why the songs that he's singing about were all geared up towards something else happening and with real life events occurring. But it's not, one, he's got such a weird fucking voice, right? So you some of the times you're not making out the words.
Right.
2, he was so poetic with his music that a lot of it is metaphorical, and you're able to take away different things, but like, the people that were listening to this music, this is all you had. You had the 5 tracks, so you could really understand what he was preaching and gather your own thoughts on what his message is. And in this, you don't have time, because they're just skipping song to song to song. So I think it really does a poor job in encapsulating the music and the transitions of where he was going and what he was preaching or singing about. So I think there was a purpose to have all that music in there. And I'm only gathering this from kind of following up on some of the, just learning more about Bob Dylan. Like I know that he's a great writer, and
that was going to be sort of my next question to lead into this discussion, because it seems like you're a bit more familiar with Bob Dylan as a musician than
for the last 3
hours.
Yeah.
Because I admittedly am not very familiar with his music or him as a person or like his work. I obviously know like a few songs.
Right.
They're kind of undeniable, but I would never find myself throwing on Bob Dylan for fun. Like, if it was playing somewhere, I wouldn't tell people to shut it off.
Right.
I find it enjoyable enough, but it is one of those things where, like, yeah, it just kind of, I miss the time. Like, I wasn't alive when this was popping, so I don't have, like, a real connection with this.
No, and it's, and that's the one thing about, I think that's like when people have important work, that's one of the reasons why it's important, because it speaks to so many different people about like either what's happening or the message itself and what could be interpreted. And, some like his work's probably going to live on for a while. It's going by the wayside just with the transition that we've had in music. But, I think that's the difficult thing with taking such a heady character and someone that had so much influence in pop and transition. I mean, he reinvented folk music and the way that we kind of take it in. So it's hard to, in the movie, it's hard to encapsulate or put in what he's preaching, essentially, right? Because and they do a good job with kind of like in the beginning of it, or in the 61, 62 era is like Kennedy, and a lot of it's the civil rights movement, right? So some of the songs that I'm sure he's preaching on is talking a little bit about the civil rights and poverty, and the end, like you're gearing up towards the Cold War. So I don't know if the Communist Party in America was still prevalent, if it's on its way out, but I know that a lot of the social rights movements was also going on with poverty. And then you get into the Cold War, and you get into nuclear weapons being about, and people kind of freaking out about, is this going to be the end, and him being disgusted with politics. And that's where a lot of his music changes, how he was feeling, and really getting to the core of people on some of those humanitarian issues. And that's the one thing that I think that's what the story is in the build up towards Dylan Goes Electric, was maybe people feeling like he's turning his back away from some of those causes.
Yeah.
And I think it's him just was, saying I'm just misunderstood.
Right. That's sort of what a lot of the backlash maybe was.
But I think that's why they had so many songs in there. But it just does. If you don't follow up with it, like if I didn't follow up with it, I would have had no idea. I'd have just been like, I just like those songs. So I did. It's not to say grew up with them, but I've listened to more Bit Dylan than you have, I'm sure.
Oh, guaranteed.
And but me too, listening to it, I'm not sitting there being like, wow, this is so deep. It's like catchy tune, and I like what he's singing. I'm not thinking about a message in there or what perhaps he might be referring to.
It's one of those things where, like, if I enjoy a song well enough, then I will look into what it means and the lyrics and the intent. But when I'm generally listening to music, it's more so just like a very surface level, in the moment type thing, right?
Yeah.
Like when I first heard Pumped Up Kicks, I'm not thinking like, oh wow, this school shooter song is awesome. Like,
right. I don't think anyone was.
I'm just thinking like, oh, the beat of this is pretty jamming, yo.
Yeah, that's where music's gotten to.
It's the illest.
No, the one song that I thought was timed up so well, and it's like it kind of was like when it hit me, the times are changing.
That was a very good scene. Yeah.
Kennedy was, I think, assassinated at that point, and he was kind of saying like we're darker times ahead, So,
the performances I like. I'm gonna be real with you, Mac. It's been probably like a month since I've seen this movie.
Wow.
I know. It's been some distance. And I didn't rewatch it because I figured, I'm
going to be fresh with it. So don't worry.
I'll be fresh with it. Yeah. But yeah, this James Mangold, obviously he did Walk the Line, right? Like he directed that film.
Oh, he did?
I think so.
Okay. I didn't look into him at all.
The Johnny Cash, Joaquin Phoenix movie. So yeah, I guess this is sort of like within his wheelhouse of films, right? Because I think I read that he did this right after his obligation to Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Yikes. Which it's funny that Wikipedia used the word obligation because
I'm sure
that movie definitely felt like an obligation.
One
let me
for
tell
you,
you,
one for me.
Pretty much, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those where like I'm kind of struggling to figure out. Where
it's
to go
okay.
with this.
I mean, speaking of Mangold of itself, I don't know if he's got a blueprint or maybe this is just what tickles his fancy.
Yeah,
and it is interesting hearing that he did Johnny Cash because Boyd.
Yeah, Boyd Holbrook shows up and just spices this movie up with a good Johnny Cash performance.
He's only in this thing for like all of 4 minutes.
Yeah, he's in like 2 scenes, right?
Yeah.
He shows up, performs, introduces Bob Dylan on stage.
Yeah.
And then the next time you see him, he's like drunk out of his mind in a parking lot.
Hits the car. I was so I've never been this movie. So it's like this movie is the lowest of stakes, right? And it's a biopic, but like it is an interesting. And we can get to the story in just a minute because it's one that I've heard gripes about. And anyways, but like there's not much happening. About the height of the tension is a fucking folk music festival that doesn't want him going electric.
Right.
It's about like the highest of tension you get, right? But I think that Johnny Cash, when he gets into his car, Bob Dylan's sitting there talking to him like, yeah, he's drunk. Who cares? That's the 60s, And he's just watching him get into his car and about to freaking take off. And, it's I've never been like, oh, my God, like Johnny Cash, did he go to Folsom Prison? Like, is this like going to be like him driving down the road and hitting someone? Ultimately, nothing happens, But I remember like sitting there, like I almost did my hands over my face, like thinking like, oh, shit, this is right. He's going to hit Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan was in a motorcycle accident and he's sitting on his bike. It's like, is he going to fucking pull out and just, kill him over?
Yeah, no, this movie never really, not that it's like a complaint necessarily, but it never really does like concern itself with like conflict or
right.
like any sort of like real plot going on, which I guess is sort of the point of it, but it does make it a little bit hard to connect with what's happening, right? And I guess that's like maybe a big gripe that I have with it as well.
Yep.
Is sort of just like, oh, the idea of the movie is that he's a complete unknown. It's the title of the film. It's sort of, what was mysterious about Bob Dylan is like, oh, this guy's kind of like wishy-washy about who he is, what his backstory is, like all this stuff.
I don't know if he was wishy-washy. I think one of the things that you could say about him is he was very counterculture.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at a time where there's a lot of groupthink going on. You got the tin can movies, you got people assimilated into roles within society, and he was kind of a fresh stroke on it, if you will, with taking the folk music and putting his own little touch on it.
Yeah.
And so that's why, like one of the things I was always trying to figure out is because he talks about himself about I remember if it was with Woody or it was with Elle Fanning, and they were talking about the movie, and he said, she didn't change, man, she's just different. She didn't do anything, and they got into like, so what's the difference then? And he's like, I don't know, she's just different, and you get a sense that at that point, like, are you able to change your identity? Are you able to go through something through growth and come out on a different and I use the word different, but like a complete new person, or complete, unknown, or are you just simply adjusting the line, which is, and so like you're watching this, and I thought it was a very, it was an interesting piece of dialogue that they had the back and forth, and it made me think about him, and it's like, all right, is he different, or has he come out the other end, unscathed, and whatever you want to say, a metamorphosis, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think he ever. Maybe you feel differently. I don't know if I ever questioned his identity or who he thought he was.
He felt pretty consistently in line the whole movie with, the idea of what the movie is presenting him as, right? Like very counterculture. And I guess that's why maybe wishy-washy was the wrong term to use. I guess it's just hard to kind of put a label on him, right? As
he's one of one.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're not going to meet someone like Bob Dylan. And it's sort of the idea of like, oh yeah, it's sort of hard to get a read on this guy.
Yes.
But in turn, because of that being the central idea of this movie, it's sort of hard to connect with it.
Yes.
Like there's a bit of like distance that I have with this film.
And I hate to not to hate, but it's just I'm so fascinated with characters like these one of ones, where you're getting the titan of industry, whatever it may be. How did they get there? What they do? Like, is it something unique? Is it something that was built into them? Is it? And like, so I was thinking about Oppenheimer, because I think Oppenheimer had the same effect, where it's really hard to connect when you just don't understand someone. And I have the same feeling about him, but it's also like, if you're able to take that step back and go, I don't need to, maybe it's not connecting, but more so of just understanding of where he's coming from. I like the character, and I like he had a little bit of this mysteriousness about him, and I think it just really felt into, he was so comfortable with who he was and where he was going and what his own beliefs were, that there's some friction there, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're gonna bump up against it at points where it's not the norm to do. And I don't want to say some of the things that he was doing, but maybe how he was acting, and that's where maybe some of the disconnection comes from. I didn't mind it at all. I mean, thought, but it's also I like to be counterculture in senses, right? And he was totally in the scene, but also leading the charge, so I don't know if this was like my general, but I was very like, I like the vibe that's going on with just how he's playing this off. And
you're waving a flag in the theater as he's going electric.
Dude, I couldn't help but smirk a lot of that. I mean, he just goes into a bar one time when he's going to listen to Bobby Newirth play, and he's just sitting there in the corner with his shades on. And, it's like one of those things where you have a hard time believing it, but also he was so like, I know I'm famous, but I don't give a shit that I'm famous. Like, I'm gonna go into this bar and watch this dude play because he said he was cool, you know?
Yeah. The amount of times when his sort of fame and popularity just like rises and like fluctuates or whatever, no matter what period it is, he's always in that like shitty little apartment with Elle Fanning.
No, I never got it. I didn't, yeah. But he also didn't care, which is
right. Exactly, he didn't care. Like,
there's some respect to that, right?
Yeah. There's like I don't know. There's like a quaintness to it, I guess, or like a modesty, or you know, whatever the word is. It's escaping me right now. I'm letting you know right now that this whole fucking past week for me personally has just like kind of been funky. Yeah. So like, if I'm not 100% on the ball for this episode, that's probably why.
I feel like there's a disclaimer every other episode we got.
Yeah.
You'll be okay. I think everyone's used to it by now.
Okay. They're just used to me being fucking half brain dead every single
you being half brain dead sounds better than me stumble through words when I'm fully engaged.
Yeah, you know what? At least you know what you're talking about. Christ.
Yeah, no, but I did like there's only one point he opens up a check is worth $10,000 and he gets like a wry smile and he's like, that's pretty cool. You know, and like that's it though. He's always, I think the biggest issue I had with this thing is how many fucking times he's just sitting around writing music.
Yeah.
You know, like that's about the only time I was like, oh my God, here we go again, where he's going to be up at 3 a.m. just jotting down notes about a song.
Movie gets a little repetitive at points.
Yeah, it's like when we have to have these conversations pop up, he's down writing about something that's on his mind, and we'll find out if the conversation even stems around that, you know? But I think that's the biggest gripe that I had with just kind of, that was about the one repetitious thing that kept popping up. I'm like, Jesus, like we don't need to keep seeing him write music.
Yeah. Too bad we didn't have a Bob Dylan cameo with him as a security guard or some shit, right? Like that would have been awesome.
He's too cool for that. He's still probably the coolest dude ever.
Probably.
I also didn't like he was always wearing shit. Like even like he wakes up in the morning one time and just throws his shades on. You know, actually, what they needed to do that I'm sure that he did not want in this.
What?
The drugs. There's not enough, and I'm not like a drug, but like. When we take these characters that are based on real life, like have some of like the use or even just the hint at it. Like you don't have to show how to, like, but apparently like he was on amphetamines a lot.
Because I think the most you ever see in this movie is him smoking weed, right? Like
and he smokes so many goddamn cigarettes, you never know if it's a joint or not.
Right, exactly.
Right? Like there's like one time I was like, that's a spliff, you know? And I hate to say it, but he's so like in his own world. You got to think he's like smoking weed or doing something. There's a lot of hinting at drinking, but they never show him like really drinking, you know? And that's like one of the things where I was like questioning watching this thing. I'm like, okay, is he really just that far out there without any sort of substance and like acting on him? Or was he not like in that scene? Right. You know, but like he was at the time, you know what I'm saying? There's just no, you know, I mean, I guess they allude to it a little bit, but it seems
the movie was not very concerned with that aspect of his life really at all.
And I don't think we need to have a scene where he's throwing, you know, beer bottles at a mirror screaming about shit, but like, just a little bit of here and there and it, you know, just make it casual or normal form. Cause that's probably what it was like then. You don't need to glorify it, but like, at least present it so we know that something's happening, that he's on some stuff. Because like, so he's on concert with Joan Baez, and he walks off on one of the things because he doesn't want to sing a song. Well, there's and you know, some of it kind of gets built into like a couple events happen that they, you know, for a movie they just make an amalgamation of it and just say, all right, we're going to take these things and kind of just
we're going to like streamline this experience.
Yeah, and we'll take different experiences. But like one, he was like drunk and or too, you know, I don't know if he's too high or something, but he walked off the stage. He's like, I'm not doing that. I'm done. You know, because there wasn't something fitting right. But in the movie they do it, and it's like he's totally sober, and he just seems like an asshole,
right?
You know,
he's just like kind of being a petty little bitch about
it. Yeah, and it's like, come on, like I don't want to. You know, this isn't what he was like. Or I have no idea, but like at least in the movie portraying it, you know, that's not. This guy's the coolest dude on the screen. Like, and that's not cool.
Yeah.
You know, like build up some stuff. Have him have a little bit of. Maybe that's where some of the conflict comes in. Is his own demons that keep coming brought up. You know, that would have been something.
Yeah. What do we think of our boy Scoot McNairy as Woody Guthrie?
God, wasted.
Yeah.
He does a really good job playing. So he had Huntington's disease. I don't exactly know what that does, but apparently
it does what it does to Scoot in this movie.
Well, I was trying to read it. So I was trying to read up about Woody Guthrie, and like I didn't get anything saying that he couldn't talk or like there's like excerpts of it seems like he was guiding Dylan on some stuff and giving him advice or saying do this and do that. It doesn't say anywhere he's just writing it because he couldn't speak, but that's maybe what Huntington's does. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I felt good performance, but wasted. You know, like drooling on himself.
Yeah.
There's a sentimental moment though.
There's a lot of like the consistent theme of sort of expectations of this movie, right? Throughout the whole film. Because there's the sort of expectation that is set on Bob Dylan when he gets to a level of fame, the expectation that Edward Norton's character thinks he's going to be able to show up for this TV program, and then Bob Dylan's late. He hops in like last minute, starts to jam. Whatever.
He wasn't going to even show up,
right?
Because the plane got canceled or whatever. He breaks out the blues guy. Shit, man, this is a public thing, man. He starts drinking on camera.
The expectations that he's supposed to uphold when he's in relationships, and of course the expectation that he's going to consistently stay within the folk world, the acoustic world, and not go into electric. Like that he'll be the same good old Bob Dylan that we've come to know and love and expect, right? And it's that's not him, and it's when those expectations break that the most sort of conflict comes from this movie. And I don't know. I like that. I like that as a consistent sort of through line.
I do. I mean, that's a great. I wasn't even really thinking about that. But I don't know if it's maybe just seeing it through his mind and like kind of going off of what he'd do. Like, you can't put an animal in a zoo, man. Like,
well, he's got that line in the elevator where he says, like, "I wish they would just let me be."
Yeah,
let you be what? Whatever it is they don't want me to be.
Yeah. And that's where, he's got no expectations for anything. And that's part of the thing when you get a $10,000 check and you just go, sweet, Oh,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm Bob Dylan.
But yeah, that is a great point. And that's where, yes, it's a lot. That's where a little bit of the turmoil and struggles of maybe his life come from. But it's also hard too to be like, all right, he's feeling any of this,
right?
Because he doesn't even feel like he lets people down. He's like, I'm doing this for me.
Because there's a lot of different ways you portray like a musician in a biopic where like the expectations are very like sky high, almost impossible to meet, and they're like part of the conflict is like, oh, you see them struggle with those expectations. They're like breaking down, they're trying to cope with it using like drugs and alcohol and this stuff like that, whereas this movie is a lot more concerned with just reflecting to you, hey, that's he had expectations, but he didn't really care about them, right? Like that wasn't his main focus. His main focus was just playing music, and if people listened, then that was cool.
And I would say rebranding those expectations. Like he was, the bar set for him, but he would move it. So I'm thinking about like the climax of the film with the Newport Festival, and him just not giving a shit. But he also was like, well, I'm gonna play what I want to play. And this is my new standard, and that's where you kind of get some of that conflict going on with what people were wanting versus what he was going to give them. And I think that was kind of going, like you mentioned, throughout the film with a lot of the different points in which he just, it's like it's not that he didn't meet them. He just was like, I'm going to do it my way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if I have too much else to talk about this movie with, unless you had other thoughts to offer we could touch upon, but I think I'm good.
Yeah, this is a very cut and dry film.
Yeah, right. It's difficult to talk about a little bit, right?
A little bit. The difficult in the sense of like, hey, let's not talk about performances for 2 hours,
right?
Right? This has got Edward Norton's fantastic in this thing. I think everyone that steps on screen knocks it out of the park. Mm-hmm. Like, there's his manager. I want to say the guy that signs him in Greenwich Village, right after Joan Baez plays.
Dan Fogler?
I think he's in Balls of Fury. Like he's
this guy.
Yeah. Like he's a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, he just popped down there, and he's got such a baritone of a voice, and that's a guy that I was like, is that guy?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it was.
It's like, I've seen this guy before.
Doing a double take. Well, I didn't really. He was Tom Cruise in Tropic Thunder, where you do that's not him. And then you have to let it play out for a couple minutes and go, that is him. Mm-hmm. He had that.
That's funny. I had that with Dan Aykroyd for Behind the Candelabra.
Yeah.
Did not fucking realize it for the longest time.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of managers. But the funny thing is, so the whole Pete Seeger thing that popped up at the Newport Festival, and there's been a little bit of controversy, and I'll get back to, I'll touch on that in a second, just so we're not reminiscent that we didn't say it.
Right. Yeah. So we don't blow through everything.
Right. The axe scene. Remember, I don't know if you remember, there was an axe and he was going to cut the cables, and there's a lot of, maybe not controversy, like when I say controversy, like low stakes controversy and he's such a pacifist too that he, no, I definitely know that's not what I was going to do. But there was there's a lot of stories going around of, did he have an axe to cut the cables? Was he going to cut the cables? Like, I thought it was such a weird, there's an axe and there's a set of cables, and he's like looking at it, and it's such a bizarre scene too, because he's kind of freaking out. He wants the music down. Everyone at the thing, it's not as unreceptive as it was in the film. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they had to build it up, and the issue that was taking place wasn't necessarily that he was pissed off that that Dylan went electric. More so is like other events taking place. So, once again, when you hear about they construe all these stories and put it into like a streamline of an event that happens, right? But I thought Edward Norton was great in this thing. God, I don't know who else is Boyd Holbrook, Joan Baez. I still can't remember her name. I think the only one I didn't really care for was Elle Fanning in this.
Yeah.
Not
really connecting with you.
No. Did you like her?
I don't think, I didn't hate her. It's just, she sort of like blends into the movie.
Yeah. And part of the scenery.
Kinda. And it's something to be said that her character isn't as, voluminous as Bob Dylan or Joan Baez or whoever else is on screen at any given moment.
Yeah.
Like, she is sort of just meant to be like the quieter, normal person that is just sort of like taking the brunt of Bob Dylan's bullshit, right?
Yeah. She's getting caught up in the whirlwind of what it's like to be with a celebrity.
Yeah.
Like, it's nothing, there's no slight on her. And right. I don't want to be like Bob Dylan's bullshit, because you can only imagine what it's like to be that famous.
I can only imagine.
Have all that. Well, Neon Crew will get there someday.
Yeah.
But yeah. And before we part ways with this, I also want to say, so the folk music in this thing, the idea behind folk is that, and they mention in the film that these songs can be passed down from generation to generation, preaching love and harmony. A lot of it was a way to send a message about some of what's going on in the world, and how to make change. And that's what Pete Seeger was really all about, and that's why he was putting on the festival, and that's why the folk music was really, they wanted it to take off to hopefully help push some of these social movements, and that's why Dylan was like the Jesus Christ, the second, the coming of folk music, as he was connecting with such a wide audience about what he was preaching. And that's why the going electric lost some of its. He felt like some of the message was going to be lost because there's a little bit more frills involved with the music. If you want to make a good song, all you need is one man and one guitar, and the music will do the rest. And there was some of the fear that with him pushing into that new wave, is that this style of music was going to go away, and that people were going to get caught up with more of the beat going on. And I thought it was so interesting to think about the music and the music industry, and where it's kind of, this is 60 years ago, and now where we've come to is rock and roll. You barely hear it. A lot of everyone that gets caught. I myself, if I listen to new music, it's mostly because it's catchy, it's poppy, there's a good beat to it.
Yeah, very similar reason to why I listen to music.
Yeah, and
initially,
you're not really listening to the music itself or what it's supposed to represent, And it's kind of funny that there's this message of 60 years ago about what Pete Seeger really wanted folk music to be in, and where he was hoping it would go, and to transpire to today, and it's all frills. There's no connection, and there's nothing really that really hits you deep. We're talking, people love Taylor Swift for what she writes, and I feel like that's towards a certain audience, about people who can truly relate to that. And it's not about what's happening in today's world or about connecting a lot of people. It's mostly about how I feel about myself.
Yeah, very sort of like personal, less sort of, I guess, like accumulative that way.
Right. Like we're not preaching political messages, and we're not talking about how to help out, those that are impoverished, or environmental rights, the civil rights stuff. And so it was very interesting. So I wanted to, the folk music, and some of the conflict with this is that, this is we're turning this into a dying breed now, and it's going to lose some of the lust that it had, and you get to see that transition a little bit through it, building up to the Dylan Goes Electric. And I think that's one of the things in the movie that was a little lost on being kind of the central point of why it was important that he stayed within the parameters of the one man, one guitar, versus getting a band and throwing in a bass. And, that was some of the when you said expectations, that's one of them too, that Dylan was going to uphold, this his preachings, his music and his writing was geared towards a lot of this social justice that they wanted. And there's the fear of that going away into commercial standards, and so just wanted to, I thought it was very interesting that, I never really, have you ever listened to folk music?
A little bit here and there. I was a lot more into like folk type music early on in college than I currently am.
That's when everyone gets into it, man.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much this will date me, but I used to listen to a lot of Mumford & Sons. Like that was sort of like my band for a while. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I'd be interested.
More like, I don't know, like banjo folk type music
I'm
at
trying
the time.
They're not even described as folk. But yes, it's got some of the same elements when it kind of comes to the strings. Right?
Yeah. That's like the closest to that
I was about to say
I'd listen to. Yeah.
There's a certain it's not aesthetic, but the way you hear it.
Yeah.
But it's still, the frills. I think it was the way it was described is it's supposed to be Shakespearean. This music's supposed to be able to pass through. And last tidbit on it, it's really funny though, because some of the music that came from, and I was talking to my brother about it, some of the music that they were singing, actually the electrical bands took and did covers of. And a lot of people now know it from these covers that these people were doing from the original pieces of them.
Yeah.
So Yeah, God rest in peace, folk music.
I thought you were gonna say God rest in peace, Bob Dylan.
No,
I was gonna tell you
he's still kicking.
He's still alive. You want to tell me how old Bob Dylan is?
He is 83 years old.
Right on the money.
Yeah. Well, I tell you,
ding.
I just was reading about his. I wanted to read up on some of his stuff, not after the 60s, because it's like, who cares after that point? The movie's not based on that, man. But I wanted to see more so of how accurate this movie was with some of the depiction. And
yeah. I think I could have used for a little bit more reading, but I've had a turbulent weekend, so not an excuse, just saying. My focus has been a little bit elsewhere. Apologies for my lack of contribution to this discussion right here. Hopefully, I'll make up for it with Behind the Candelabra, because I do have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I think you'll be excited for what I have to say about it.
Cool. This movie's not like it's enjoyable. It's cool, but it's not like fun.
Right, and I think a big part of it for me too is that I wasn't able to fully connect with it in the way a lot of people might. So we can get into ratings.
Okay. I get to do this one first.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
okay.
you do.
It's a very I'll say it's a very what do you piece by piece, it's very ABC. I'm trying to, I can't remember the phrase. It
by the numbers,
Thank
sort of.
you.
Biopic.
By the numbers.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what. In terms of the directing style, and Mangold really lets the actors chew the scene. It's not stylistically done, but I did love the '60s vibe. Totally felt like I was in the '60s. Like this, I should be up for best costume, and I don't think they do set design, but man, like of the areas that we were in, just really rocked. I really enjoyed seeing a young Bob Dylan, and just I thought he was totally counterculture, and I loved how cool he was. Like I vibed out with it. The music, it reminded me, of just me when I was younger, listening to some of his tunes, and then really to get into some of the representation of it, and I never had a respect for folk music, never knew what it was for, and this movie really shined a light on what it was geared towards or represented. I thought that was really cool, and I just enjoyed this thing thoroughly. Like it got done, and I did not, however long it was, I couldn't have told you. Like I was totally invested throughout the whole thing. So I'm giving this a 9 out of 10.
Damn.
Yeah.
Pro Bobby.
I will tell everyone. I mean, I'm starting to learn with biopics and pieces of history. Read up on it a little bit before you go into it, and you'll have just a little bit more of an insight. Or when you're done, read up on it. Because it makes it that much more fascinating. Because what we're seeing with the events that are happening, it's just so hard to, put yourself back 60 years and think about like what was the political climate like.
Right.
I think it also helps to read American Prometheus.
So don't be mad at me. This is a solid 6 out of 10 for me. Did not hate this movie at all. I liked it. I enjoyed my time with it. I like the songs. I like the performances. It's one that I think given with most movies, even if it's been a month since I've watched them, I still think I can usually conjure up some baseline thoughts that can contribute some sort of like valuable insight or what have you. For this movie specifically, just because I initially struggled to connect with it, it's one that it doesn't really like live within my sort of sphere of knowledge, I guess. And it also doesn't help that I didn't really know much about Bob Dylan before going into it. I feel like I still don't really know that much about him after. But there's things about this film that I appreciate. So 6 out of 10.
Nice.
Yes. Speaking of appreciation, boy oh boy, did Liberace appreciate Scott Thornton being around, at least for a time. I'm of course talking about Behind the Candelabra, your recommendation for this episode.
Yes.
So
all right. Take it away.
I will let you go on stage.
Here we go.
And present this movie in a Rolls Royce.
Yeah. God, this $100,000 car. He had fucking 4 of them. There's so much behind it. All right.
I can't wait.
So, Behind the Candelabra, directed by Steven Soderbergh, written by Richard Gravinessi, something like that.
Yeah, about close enough.
Yeah,
Is this the first Soderbergh that we've talked about? Probably.
I'd have to go through. I think it is.
At least officially. I know you've brought him up multiple times.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I don't know if we ever did Contagion or.
Nope.
Logan. He didn't do Logan Lucky, did he? Anyways.
I think he did.
Okay. I think this is our first piece. So, starring Michael Douglas as Liberace, or also Liberace.
We don't need to trudge up old mispronunciations that totally didn't happen.
Matt Damon as Scott Thorson. Very small appearances, but I just loved it. Scott Bakula as Bob Black.
Oh yeah, hell yeah.
Who else is in this thing?
We got Dan Aykroyd as Seymour Heller.
I was about to say he was going to be the guy ended it on.
My favorite of this movie.
Please tell me.
Rob Lowe.
Yes, as Dr. Jack Starts. The whole reason. There were two reasons why this thing got. I wanted to watch this thing. Oh, and Nicky Katt as Mr. Y, who was selling drugs to Scott Thorson. That we'll get into. So this movie is it's actually based on a book by Scott Thorson titled Behind the Candelabra.
Yep.
It is depicting the relationship between Scott Thorson and Liberace from 1981, 1979, something like that, to about 84, 83.
Yeah.
And essentially what it is starts off with...
I think it's like 77 to 83.
Something like that. They had a 5-year relationship is what I know. And it ended with the 82 Oscars. Like it went into it's something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they do the 82 Oscars in 1983, and they broke up in 83.
Yep.
So it starts off with Matt Damon as he's kind of like an animal trainer. He's working with animals.
He wants to be a vet.
Yeah, he wants to be a vet, but they're like, he's on set for a movie, and he's doing the dogs and then getting them to bite, and they're kind of... he's telling. Anyways, it's not that big of a deal. He wants to be a vet. He's working with animals, and he happens to run into Bob Black at a gay bar. I have to imagine, and Bob ends up picking him up at his house one day and says, "Hey, we're gonna go check out this concert out in Reno. We're going to Vegas, right?" And you can only assume that Bob is the predator for Liberace. Where he's like the scouting talent.
Yeah.
Because every time he pulls up, he's always got he's got a new guy with him.
He's got like a fresh new young man that's willing and able.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of shit in this thing. So Bob brings him to the concert. He runs into they talk to Liberace, and Liberace says, "Well, Scott, you must come by my house. Like I must show you around." And they get to talking, and Scott says he can help out with the baby boy, the dog. And, he can clear out the ice for him. And anyways, they get into a little bit more of a romantic relationship. Liberace's kind of grooming him. There's a lot of this, just whining and dining and taking him out. And eventually they start a relationship. And the movie takes off from there. It's just a real introspection, I guess you'd say, or a retrospection of the relationship that they had over the course of time and leading up to Liberace's death. Mm-hmm. So I saw this thing. I saw this when it first came out. I used to listen to the Corolla podcast way long ago, and it got mentioned about how fucked up the relationship was. Yeah, like they were talking about whatever, and they brought up Liberace, and so it's so funny because I remember thinking like, all right, Liberace, like I'm thinking of like Ludwig van Beethoven, Mozart. Like I thought he was way back when, right? I didn't realize this thing was in the 70s. Well, and mind you, a year later they come out with this film. I was like, I gotta check it out. I heard about how fucked up this relationship is. He made him look like him. Like it's so weird, And I'm watching this thing, and I was like, I can't believe how much like fun this is. You know,
it's so fun.
Like
this movie's fucking hilarious.
Yes, okay. So just to preface everyone, and I think Soderbergh, I give him so much credit for this, and I don't know if he's got a knack for doing it or taking some dark subject matter. This thing on the surface is dark as shit, and it's really like a tragedy, if you will, for Scott Thorson.
I went into this thinking, oh, it's a musical biopic and like involving toxic relationships and drug use and like plastic surgery. I thought this was going to be like taking itself very seriously.
Right, which it could have. This thing could have easily, if another guy gets this, totally dark. Look at the grooming, the predatory nature of older men with younger men who have got money.
Substance abuse issues.
Yes. The artificialness, if you will. Like, not at all. Not at all. This thing is like... We're just gonna look at this homosexual couple, and Liberace had to have been a fun guy, so we're just gonna make it fun, and we're just gonna throw in like really dark areas of subjects that just get strewn in here, and it's just gonna be, you're gonna have a laugh out loud riot.
We're gonna make it fun, but we're also going to film it and present it in a way that is still authentic, but yet you can just easily disconnect and take a step back and go, this is like the most ridiculous shit that I'm seeing now. The humor comes from just like how fucked up these situations are.
Yes, like some of the uncomfortableness of it, but also like, so I watched this with Jasmine, and I was like, it really feels like he just went back and said, all right, we're just going to say everyone's cool with this. Like, let's just act like this is a normal, like,
yes.
Let's say it was a 65-year-old lady and a 22-year-old guy, and the lady had all this money and she was super energized. And we're just going to show that. Like, that's how, like, that's what he did. Like I said, it's really messed up everything that happened. Like, forget all of it. Let's just look at that relationship. And that's what he did.
The nonchalant way this movie presents the events that are happening is far and away what amuses me about this movie the most.
Oh my god!
Right?
There we go. I am so yes.
Like when they're just like in the hot tub together, just casually.
It's a smash cut to them, and he's sitting there. And the first one that they do is Liberace's so comfortable sitting there. He's sprawled out. They're both naked in this thing.
Right.
And he's sipping champagne, and Scott Thorson's just sitting there like, oh my God, I'm talking to Liberace. He's got so much money. Also, I don't know if I'm totally comfortable with this. Sip. Oh yeah, like, okay, this is normal,
Right.
And oh my God, Scott, I just have to tell you, like, I love what you did to baby boy. My baby boy's going to be just like, okay, we're here with him. We're hanging out.
I've got to tell you, Scott, I've got an issue with Billy.
He's ruining me.
He's ruining me.
And the funny part is, Billy's sitting there eating steak, and he goes, you better not get ketchup on that soup. Like, he's not doing anything.
I know, he's being so fucking catty to him the whole time.
And he's like, he's going to destroy my world, my shows. No one will show up anymore. The most dramatized way of doing things. And Billy's just like, I'm on my way out. I like eating. I'm just kind of fed up. And like, it's nothing, there's no contentious. He's not like they're doing anything, it's just so funny. He's like, he's gonna ruin me.
The every single scene in this movie is pretty much like that, right?
Oh God, yeah.
Like, obviously there's moments of like, emotional outbursts or like, things where it's like, okay, this is very much not Chalamet anymore, right?
Even
then it's like presented in a way where it's like, yeah, this is just happening. And it's absurd. Well, there's an absurdity to every single thing that takes place in this movie.
Yes, but I will say it's not out of realism. Like,
no, not at all. That's like the great balancing act of this movie.
Yes, it's like there's a point. So and we'll get into it. But there's a point where they're about to break up, and he's at his house, and they're trying to get him out, and he gets a gun. And then he's like, I'm going to call the cops. And he's so coked out. He calls, and he's like, who is this? And then he hangs up the phone. And it's like, that's absurd, right? But also, like, if you're that drug addled, like, I remember reading a book on a baseball player that, you know, had drug problems. And that was like, you get paranoid. Like, that shit does happen. Mm-hmm. So it's not it's not unfathomable that he called 911 and within 20 seconds forgot who he called and what he was calling about. Oh my God!
It's so over the top.
It is.
It's over the top in a way where it doesn't pull you out of the film.
No, and I will say, like, we're not defending. I shouldn't say defending it because I think we're both on the same cadence with it. But also, it is over the top. But it's 100. This guy was worth. I did the math on it. $370 million.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. So like, you're just taking I asked Jasmine, I was like, I don't want to offend anyone or say anything out of line, you know, but like an old gay guy, you're giving him a bunch of money. You're giving him like any guy that any youth that he wants. And he is the showman of showmen.
Right.
Like he was the top of the entertainment industry when it came to Vegas acts.
Yeah.
You know, so like it is so over the top, but also it's not where it's like unreal, you know, like obviously it's, you know, done for effect, but like I could see some of this stuff happening, maybe not to the extent that it happens, but they do really glamorize it.
Well, a part of what Steven Soderbergh does really well is he manages to take something that was so real yet so ridiculous that he's able to portray it in a way where it's like, yeah, the absurdity of this is because this is stuff that happened, right? This is the fact that this has been some form of reality is what's so wild and alien and sort of like off-putting about it. And it's the idea that like, yeah, the people who are just rich to that level and famous to that level just live completely different lives than you and me.
Yes.
Right? And that's sort of why Matt Damon's character is so easily able to be like allured to that world and to like so quickly adjust to it. The fact that he's like so young and inexperienced with that sort of thing is just like, yeah, this guy's like perfect to be molded into this sort of like weird, tacky, like gold-plated fucking environment that's just filled with nothing but vanity and sort of like cattiness, right? Like, I like the detail of this movie where like Matt Damon's character starts out and he's got like a little bit of inflection, right? This sort of like kind of gay inflection that some gay men have. But as the movie goes on, it just gets stronger.
Oh, yeah.
Like it cuts to like, I think 2 years later and he's like, so I was thinking maybe we should just go out some more. I want to see some more people. And like the movie starts and Matt Damon's like, oh yeah, I was hoping to be a veterinarian. You know? He's like a little bit more like formal spoken about it. It's just so funny to me the way that it plays so naturally in juxtaposition to the absurdity of it.
Yes. Yeah, and it's done in the way that the linearness of it too is also what makes it believable in the sense that you're just starting to see this get more and more comfortable with his lifestyle.
Yeah,
right?
I really like the way this movie's structured.
Oh, it was okay. I'm happy to hear it because this thing is so. One of the reasons why this, not to say buried, it was supposed to get a premiere. Between the audiences, test audiences, and the producers, or they said it was too gay.
Yeah, I read that the studio was like, "This is too much of a homo film to put in theaters,"
and they're like, "We're not doing it." And I'm like, "Oh my god!" That's why it, you know. And I don't know. Like I was telling my parents about it because I had to pick up my daughter yesterday, and I was telling my mom, I was like, "You should check it out," because I was like, there are some uncomfortable scenes, you know, and it's really like it's not even done where it's high tension. It's just, you know, I mean, at least for me, just a little uncomfortable.
Well, even if even if it was a heterosexual couple, right?
Yeah,
it would still be uncomfortable because you're just locked into the intimate moments of their life.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like just the fact that like we're seeing this, like we're basically just like flies on the walls of this like absurd situation,
right?
What makes it inherently uncomfortable.
Yes.
Not the fact that they're just like two gay men like boning. It's just like, yeah, the presentation of this is what makes this
like if you took
feel weird.
Like a 63-year-old chick and then one smash cut to them having sex and then another smash cut they're going to a sex shop and going into like shame,
Yeah, or the fact that like this person's just talking about like, oh yeah, I love that we get to have sex, but I also want to adopt you. You're like a son to me, Scott.
Yeah. Oh my God, I totally forgot that was in this thing too.
Yeah,
like he adopted him. Like, and then like Rose, Scott Thorson's foster mom, I want to say.
Yeah, something like that.
It's like you guys are dating, but he's also making you his son.
Well, he has that line where he goes like, I want you to think of me as your lover, your father, your brother.
Right. But I'm saying like there are other people that are grounded in reality. Like, and actually like, hey, we make a hard living.
Yes.
That hear what's going on and they're like, are you sure this is making sense to you?
Right.
Because to us, it's not.
Yeah.
And even as an audience member, it's not. And he's like, no, it's totally fine. I'll be all right. Like you just don't get Lee. You don't understand Lee. Like he loves me and that I'll be with Lee, And there was that. I mean, I completely forgot about that, and I almost thought that they got married, but that laws. There was no laws around.
You couldn't do it at the time. Yeah, it was impossible.
Right.
Yeah, I love that they include his foster parents and like. It's enough to where like we can cut back to them and be reminded, oh yeah, we're still on planet Earth.
Yes.
Like there's people who like live normal lives and have normal jobs and like worry about like normal struggles in life. And then you got fucking Matt Damon who's like, after the plastic surgery looks like a fucking alien.
Oh my God. Yo, and then all right, so I said I reference this movie a lot. I don't reference it a lot, but the California diet, I always make that joke around New Year's Eve, and people that just like, if they go like, oh, I'm going to go on a diet, or I'm going to watch, and I always, the California diet, and everyone, it's always, well, what's that? It's like, oh, it's just a bunch of Coke and water.
It's just a fucking like bottle of pills. Yeah. That's all it is.
Oh, dude, it's it's the uppers and downers. We're gonna give you a lot of amphetamines, so we're gonna give you a lot of uppers, so your heart rate's gonna be constantly going. We're also gonna level you out with a bunch of downers, and just Rob Lowe coming in there going, your California diet. You're going to be guaranteed to lose 20 pounds.
It's a California diet.
Oh, my God.
It's not addictive. Yeah. Trust me.
Scientifically, it hasn't scientifically been proven to be addictive.
Don't worry, though. You won't be able to fully close your eyes.
Oh, my God. That was back, I found out, too, like back in the day, they had to, before facelifts and all that stuff, like you could do it, but like in the 70s, I want to say, they'd pull your skin back and tape the back of your head to keep so that's what Rob Lowe had to do. He said he was in makeup for a total of 12 hours every day.
That is absurd.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think it was worth it because he is far and away my favorite part of this movie, right?
Okay, that's all because he is mine too. Like he's only in the thing for 4 minutes.
Because you have to understand, like, okay, Liberace is pretty crazy, right? Like he lives a lavish lifestyle.
Certifiably insane. Yeah.
Well, like just like he lives on a planet that we just do not, right? That absurd amount of wealth and that talent, that fame.
Yeah. Embellishes it. Like he really soaks it in. Like he knows he knows he's living on another planet, but he is also like, I'm the ruler of this planet.
And then Matt Damon comes in and it's like, okay, this like impressionable kid has now been kind of corrupted and is turning into the worst version of himself.
Well, he's gonna turn into Liberace.
Well, what do we have to introduce that is like more insane than that? I know. Let's get fucking facelifted Rob Lowe in this movie and have him be like the most bananas character while also being the chillest, weirdly enough.
He's also like you're now seeing the people that operate in this world that Liberace operates in. Like there are enough people, like everyone in here kind of is in between both. Like If they're working with Liberace, either they've been groomed or seduced by him, or they are working for him in a manner that they can hover between both of, like, he is Lee.
And
Lee is Lee.
Not one of these people is quote unquote normal in any way. There's like a level of
is, to some extent.
Even like, him though, he's just like he's kind of like a little bit not bombastic, but just like, I don't know, like it seems like he's gotten so used to the world that he's just like absorbed a little bit of it. You know, he's a little ridiculous. But
yes, I agree. But it's keeping up with Lee. But I mean, like if you're talking about like grounded characters in this thing, he's probably third.
Right.
You know, like Bob Black and Dan Aykroyd are both like, they are both kind of floating between both worlds. If it was a Venn diagram, they'd be in the middle, you know?
Yeah.
And so you only like Lee's Lee, right? In this whole thing. And then you introduce Rob Lowe, who is also in that world. And like almost like a predator to other, you know, to the vanity of it all.
Well, it's like he's like the purified version of it. He's like the version of it where like if you distill somebody who's been so completely removed from like how normal human beings live their lives, you would get him.
Oh yeah. And he's the California diet. don't worry about a thing.
And I like
selling drugs, and he's just like 20 pounds in 4 weeks, and guaranteed.
They never like, they don't overdo it.
No,
and it's not like they don't give you enough either. Like they give you the perfect amount of his character.
He is like a caricature of like what it would be like, but you have to believe that there are people, like he's a person, like that person really exists somewhere and has those thoughts and acts in that manner. You know what I'm saying?
Perfectly. There's like the risk of like, okay, does he go like too goofy with this?
Right.
Does he not go hard enough? It's like, no, perfect balancing act.
The best
favorite part of this film.
He gets out of the fucking plastic surgery, and like, you know, Lee's face is so fucking tight, and he's like, will I ever be able to close my eyes? He goes, no, but you'll get used to sleeping with them open.
And then like smash cut, he's like in bed.
Lee, you're snoring again. Lee, you're snoring. And he looks over and he's just staring at him.
Lee, wake up. Wake up.
Oh my God.
I love that.
Oh, this movie is so insane.
That scene too, he just like, he pauses for like 4 seconds. And then it's just like,
yeah, because it lets you sit. Is he just staring? Because you wouldn't be shocked if he was, right? Like if he was just sitting there staring at him awake, like there would be no like, oh, that was creepy, you know.
This movie is so fucking like, this is just a comedy. Like this is just a comedy film.
I would say it's a dark comedy. Like I think the ability to take a lot of the subjects, you know, like the subject matter, if you will. I mean, there's so many horrible things going on in this thing with what Liberace does to Scott Thorson, you know, and I mean, really just fucked up his life forever. And then just to make it as comedic as it is like, I think it's a dark comedy for sure.
Right. And there's a small part of me that, you know, was able to feel bad for Scott Thorson at like a certain point. I guess that's like not necessarily like a ding against this movie, but like it is just sort of that disconnect of like, oh yeah, I am a fly on the wall watching this play out. And at a certain point, I don't necessarily feel bad for these people anymore, right? Because they live like such a life of excess and tackiness and like human disconnect, and like all this shit. But there are those moments where like, oh, we've got Matt Damon finding out that his foster mom has passed away. Yeah. And there is like a genuine emotion there. Yeah. That is like making that sort of connection of like, oh yeah, this like guy is coming back up to the surface that he's been pushing down for so long, of like, yeah, I'm basically like Liberace 2.0, living my best life, going through like sitting in hot tubs, drinking champagne up my butt. And then like to have that moment of like come back down to earth is very effective after we've lived with him for so long of just being like the most ridiculous person alive. Like it's very effective that way.
Yes, there's a little bit of a human moment in there, but it's effectively done.
When you watch this, and I'm going to ask you this, did you also have the idea when Matt Damon first meets with Liberace.
Liberace, yeah.
Yeah, and they like go into the dressing room or whatever, and he sees Billy Leatherwood. Is that his name?
Yes.
He sees Billy Leatherwood, and Billy Leatherwood is kind of like, he's very like kind of like snarky. He's like ignoring everybody. He's like kind of snickering to himself, like passively about like things that are being said.
Yeah.
And then like the next scene that you see him in is like, oh yeah, he's being escorted out of the house.
Yeah.
Because now you've got like this new hot piece coming in the form of Matt Damon. I did have the thought of like, this is where the movie's going to come full circle. Matt Damon is going to be in his position by the end of the film.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He's going to be the one that's
yes.
like, resentful and has all this like negative feelings towards Liberace.
Yes.
And of course,
yes.
that's exactly where it goes with like that same exact type of shot.
Well, that's why they do it with. So Billy is he's saying the same lines that Lee's saying when Matt Damon comes in, because I'm sure he saw the guy before him do it. So it kind of it alludes to the sense that Liberace's got a factory line going with young men coming in and out. Mind you, so in the film, Matt Damon, just also so we touch on his age because I read about it.
Yes,
Scott Thorson, he's 18.
He's
in
18.
real life.
Yep.
And I'm sure Billy was 18, and Boyd, Kerry James was 17 when he met Liberace. So he's got
a fresh young boy.
He's got a system of men, boys coming in, hitting into their what's after adolescence, maybe still adolescent, not adolescent. Anyways,
just like young adulthood.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
The little on the cusp of manhood.
Yeah, I mean, you turn 18, you can drink or you can smoke cigarettes and vote. So, but no, I like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, like okay, and there was a sense of maybe Liberace dies with them, like they go out happy.
Yeah.
Because I knew that like he was gonna go out at some point. And I thought maybe they spent their days getting older and it's the 80s, whatever it is, but then when they start getting into the arguments, it's like, oh yeah,
Well, it's funny too, because this and I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're good.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
This movie does a good job of like, it does display the good moments of their relationship that they had, them chilling on the couch, watching TV, kind of like making jokes with each other, being comfortable. But then it never feels like it's doing that in service of, oh, well, now we're going to show you the good parts, so we're going to take away the idea that this is ridiculous and silly. And it's like, no, it still manages to retain that feeling while still like showing you, their relationship definitely wasn't good and was toxic, but it also did have like genuine moments of heart and feeling into it.
There's a, I mean, like we were talking about. I mean, yes, he's living in his own universe and he's the king of it, but they're still human. At the end of the day, they bleed.
One thing you could never say about Liberace in this movie is that he was an emotionless robot.
Right.
Like he felt things a little too much at points, right?
Embellished it. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But. No. I what I'm saying is like they do. It's just a fantastic job of like him just saying we're going to take out all the judgment of everything going on and we're just going to show you a relationship. I mean, it's a genuine relationship. Not everything going on really heightens it, and you get into these absurd situations and shit and they're always going from one absurd situation to the next, But they take moments to kind of like if you were a fly on the wall, like you're going to see the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And for it to last 5 years, there's got to be some good and some bad, So
absolutely.
No, it was good. I mean, it really made it, I guess you could say connected to the characters, but at least like respect the relationship and have some feelings towards it, and
you're invested in a way, like more for me of like a morbid curiosity sort of thing. Right.
Yeah. I mean, however you want to view it, the characters are fun. And I mean, like that's, people love a villain, like they want to hate you, they want to love you, but they're giving you some emotion, right? So you obviously have some sort of outcome that you care about, right? There's an investment.
So I was doing a little bit of reading about this movie. One of the more fascinating things I learned was that because watching this movie, I thought, wow, Michael Douglas really must have like trained hard to hit these piano notes.
Right.
But what I learned was they superimposed his head on another person's body, which That's pretty fucking impressive special effects.
Didn't even think,
because I couldn't even tell.
No,
like I didn't even think that was an idea that they had to do. Right. Like props to them for this very seamless special effects work.
Yes.
Like I thought that was very interesting. Yeah, what else did I learn about this? I guess I didn't really have like too big of a knowledge on Liberace as a person, obviously, the way I pronounced his name the last episode.
He's, it's a dying breed that the Vegas shows and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where at the height of the time, I'm sure it was huge, but now it's not, it's kind of by the wayside. You see the Little Rivers has like people showing up and stuff, but it's always like, I don't know who's going to that.
Right.
It just, there's so much more access to media and being able to see the performers, and you don't have to wait for a concert. Like back then you'd have to wait for a concert or see him, at the show, and now it's, if he was alive today, you just YouTube him. Someone's going to have a video of him doing his stuff.
Right. Like Vegas isn't like this locked in end all be all place for, performers and celebrities and showmen or whatever. Right.
Right. And that's why I think it's the story itself. And I think the story is a little messed up that it just, no one really ever talks about it. Mm-hmm. Like even like when I heard about this, and this was 12 years ago, I hadn't heard of Liberace, like maybe once or twice,
Yeah.
And no one's really talking, especially you'd think more Midwestern people would talk about him. He is one of our own.
Yeah, where is he from?
Wisconsin.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't remember, and I don't remember what.
Because they make it a point where he's like, oh yeah, I'm from Wisconsin too.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was like one of those things is he telling the truth? Is it just like relate and connect?
Right. Is he like trying to lure him in?
Yeah.
Into the hot tub?
Predatory thing.
For some champagne and bubble time.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, but he was from Wisconsin, and but that, I don't think a whole lot of people, I don't even know. That's kind of another thing I brought it up. It's just a really fascinating story that no one ever really talks about. You never hear people reference. Mm-hmm. Granted, now we're doing it in more of a lighthearted fashion as opposed to probably when you'd hear.
Yeah, we're having some goofs and some gaffes.
Well, and I showed this to Jasmine. She was like, "This is so fascinating." She's like, "This is a case study of itself."
I think there is something to be said though that like this movie is just like narratively effective in drawing us in and like, oh yeah, I want to see like what this is like and how it plays out. It also says a lot too that, it's just generally just well shot.
Yeah.
I like the use of music and the absence of music. Mm-hmm. The only time we really hear it, I think, is when he's playing on stage, right? Like I can't think of any other moment in this movie where it's like, oh yeah, this has like a score that's getting in the way.
We're gonna make you feel the way you need to feel. No, they let those two just chew on the fat.
Yeah, and that's the perfect way of going about that. Like It's such a good use of absence of music.
And also too, I will say, Liberace didn't like playing the piano outside of the show, so that might have been playing into some of the character of. We're not going to have any music going because he didn't have any music going. Like there wasn't anything that was really influencing him. His life was on the stage when he was playing it. Outside of that, maybe it was just, hunting down young men.
It says a lot about the way they portray it and like, oh yeah, he's someone who did not like playing music outside of the stage or whatever. He was just concerned with like his lifestyle and the way he dressed and the way people perceived him and the way he like commands Scott Thornton to live his life much like him. He even wants him to look like him. It's interesting in juxtaposition to like other musical movies where the character is like, oh yeah, I got to constantly be playing piano or like writing songs. Right. We got to like show how this process
he's a showman,
works.
Yeah. That's they get a little bit of the showman. They get into the showmanship of, it's more about the allure of seeing Liberace.
The bravura.
Yeah. No, I just thought about it. I was like, he adopted this dude, made him look like him, and was having sex with him. I was like, it's so... Yeah.
If that tells you, that really says more about like the vanity of his character more than anything else,
yes.
right? Like,
vanity is such a great word.
I think I'm so great that I want to fuck myself.
Yes.
Like, a younger, hot version of myself.
Oh my God. Yes. Case study. There's got to be something out there.
Oh, absolutely.
But he also, and he was very no one knew that he was a homosexual That was the other crazy thing about this thing. Like, he had taken the UK Daily or whatever it is to court.
Took them, to court. Yeah,
sued him for libel and won. And I don't think anyone else ever dared. And then he had, and I found out what the slang term for like a buffer. They call it a beard. So he always had a beard with them, or they always use and
I read that Betty White was a beard for Liberace.
Yes.
So that people thought that they were a thing. And then it would deflect rumors of his homosexuality.
They were good friends too. So she was willing to do it for him, and...
Right, like, don't worry, I got you, fam.
yeah, right here. I think she ended up later stating that he was indeed a homosexual.
Right, yeah.
But at the time, she protected him, and that's what, God knows what Dan Aykroyd had to pay for.
It's crazy to think that people back then would look at this guy, how he performs, how he dresses, like the way he talks, the way he carries himself, and they would think, straight as an arrow.
Yeah.
This guy loves fucking chicks.
Cutting so much carpet. Yeah. He could fill a house.
Oh my God. Bet you he loves sucking on damn titties, am I right?
The best thing, they go into this thing and they're like, no one knows he's a queen. Yeah. Bob Black says it to Matt Damon like right away. And Matt Damon's like, what?
Yeah, I love his reaction. It's like, wait, huh? What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Like, even as an audience member too, like when he says it, it's like, come on,
right?
Even we're watching it, being like, "There's no way," but and it's, hey, you got enough money. Oh my God, I wish Dan Aykroyd was in this just a little bit more to hear about like what he had to buy.
It's funny you bring up Dan Aykroyd, and I think I mentioned this earlier.
Yeah,
I did not know it was him until like maybe the last like 20 minutes of this movie.
Yeah, I can't believe that.
It's crazy.
Now granted, he does. It's a great job.
He's costume very and good in this movie. Yeah,
very not Dan Aykroyd.
No,
I mean, like to some extent, like he's still got. There's a couple like. Have you ever seen? I think it's Tommy Boy.
Not the whole thing. I've seen so many bits and pieces of that movie.
There's like Joe Callahan or whatever of the auto parts manufacturing. Mm-hmm. He's pulling that business character a little bit into this. So I think that's why I knew a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I recognize that style where it's all business, no frills.
I love his look in this movie too. He's got like the big kind of like thick square glasses.
Yes.
With like the messy black hair.
Yes. Yeah, and he's got like a very drawn out like kind of dress shirt. The huge collar.
He's got like the like cream color, like just broad.
Yeah.
Like almost like tweed looking suit jacket.
And I think, does he not have any necklaces on? I feel like he's got some gold chains on or something. Like he's like a
I'm trying to remember.
He's a very glamorous business. Like it looks like he's the dude doing for like being Liberace's manager.
Yeah,
I obviously don't live the style he lives, but I'm gonna dress up just a little bit. I'm gonna embellish a little bit of like this flavor that we got going on.
Right. Yeah. I also, speaking of jewelry, I read that they had to glue the rings onto his fingers so that when he was playing piano,
they wouldn't
like fucking fly off or whatever, or clank around and shit.
Interesting.
Yeah. So fun fact about that, because he had all those fucking like infinity stones on his hand.
Oh my God. So then Scott Thorson's selling them.
Right. Yeah. That's another compelling part of this movie too, is like, just like the financial struggle of the character while he's like living in this big gaudy mansion. And,
wow.
Like ostensibly, like they should have the money for this, right?
No,
like,
I wish would have got brought up at some point, just made mention of it. Like have a little snippet of dialogue in an argument.
Yeah.
Because he talked about the drug use. He knew that he was using the drugs. He kept asking him to stop taking the pills. You got to imagine that he put him on a
like an allowance.
Yeah. And he's already spent the allowance, you know, and because there's no way it's like they don't have the money for this.
Right. And that was kind of like my thought too. It's like, oh yeah, this guy's desperate, but only because Liberace doesn't want to give him the money.
Well, and that's probably part of the grooming and the this predatory is like I have complete control over your life.
Yep.
And the little trust that you had, it's been stripped, and now and Scott doesn't make any money doing anything. If anything, he could go out selling his face as Liberace's son.
Yeah. Matt Damon
$3.
does such a good job at the start of this movie of like being such a moldable boy. It's like, oh yeah, this guy is like such a amiable blank slate.
Yes.
Like you could just take him and turn him into anything. And then this movie does a good job also, and he does a good performance of embodying the like, oh yeah, I've morphed into this like unrecognizable, like disconnected.
It's not even my fucking face anymore.
Yeah, little rich boy.
Yeah.
Who's like addicted to fucking pills and drugs and all this shit. And like doesn't know anything outside of like absurd gross wealth, you know,
for 5 years. That's the other thing is too. It's crazy. It's not like this spanned.
Yeah, it's not like 20 years or whatever.
Yeah. It's 5 years and all of a sudden he's ruined, you know, and
it's like the same amount of time people go to law school for.
Well, you know, the mental game of all this with the manipulation. I mean, and all the stuff going on. Really, I mean, it's such a, and you're still influential. I mean, the brain's still growing, and you're still learning about. Like at 18, people are going to college, and they're changing their identity in college. You know, you're really
they're like figuring out who they are.
Yeah.
Your brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25.
So,
right?
I mean, I guess if you're a guy,
give or take, I'm sure it's different for some people.
Yeah,
but
for me, it's probably 35.
Yeah, I'm still waiting until I hit 40.
Yeah. They take him, and they, you know, it's very interesting that he gets this lifestyle thrust on him, but he's made to be that way by the end of it, you know, but. God damn, if he isn't great.
And I love how it circles back towards the end of like him sort of like living a simple life by himself. He's like dressed a little bit more normal. And
I think they did Scott Thorson in real life a decent. Oh, that's still the late 80s though, because he's still alive.
I was gonna say there's like a lot of shit. I don't know how much you read about him.
I had to read up on it. Yeah, it's tragic.
I guess he was like a witness to like a murder that was pretty prolific.
Wonderland murders.
Yeah,
there was he
was like pretty integral to like that case.
The Wonderland gang or whatever. There was a mafia. I mean, they said mafia took out a gang member, and he saw it.
Yep, he was part of that. He was caught with I think methamphetamine.
He never got off of it.
Like sent to prison for like 4 years or something like that. And then he died when he was in his 60s from
prison,
from like a heart attack or it was like heart failure combined with cancer. I think
he got cancer his first stint in prison, and then he got out and he was asking for help because he was on the state dime, and they were treating him, you know, because if they're not going to let you die in there.
Right.
He got out. And then he went under an alias and was stealing credit cards. And
it's a great idea.
I'm thinking he was stealing credit cards to pay for his cancer treatment, but God knows what he was doing with it because they said, so he did the settlement, right? It was $75,000 and talk about a great scene. So he's doing all the shit. He's trying to palimony, right? Saying that we've been together long enough. I have a certain lifestyle.
Palimony is a great term.
I think that's what it is, right? I didn't read into it.
I didn't even know it was like a real term.
Well, there's alimony. So if you're married and you get a divorce, there's alimony so that the spouse, whoever does it, can sue for if you know
they were like financially dependent on them.
Yes. Yeah. There's alimony. So palimony, I can only presume is if you're in a relationship long enough. You're considered partners. I don't know if it's partners for life, but you could be considered financially dependent, right? But it's got to be over a certain amount of time. So I don't know, 5 years, 7 years. So that's what he was suing for. And they eventually settled out of court because they didn't want this thing going public. And they give him $75,000. And then he got 3 cars and a couple dogs, right, which were worth $20,000. So he made out with $95,000. The best thing about this is he's like, no, I deserve more. God damn it. I mean, $250,000? We can't get $250,000? Scott, you're lucky that you're getting this.
Right. This is the only deal they tell him.
It's bullshit. Billy got $300,000. I called him. He got $300,000 and he storms off. You know, so like he knows the game that's set up and he's like, I should walk away with this amount of money. But immediately after that, he went out. They said that he immediately went out and bought drugs and jewelry with the money. So spent $95,000 probably sold the dogs and the cars and lived it up for 2-3 extra months.
Quite the different ending to him as a person, compared to the ending of this movie and like where it leaves off.
That's there's a sentimental touch with it, right?
Yeah, because there's like, and I guess maybe that's sort of kind of an issue I have with this movie is like we spent this whole time in this fly on the wall way of observing this ridiculous situation, this relationship,
right,
and like the absurdity of how it all plays out, and then at the end, Liberace is revealed to have contracted the AIDS virus. He passes away from that. Initial reports say that he had a heart attack.
Doctored up, perhaps. Yeah. Well, the coroner.
The coroner was like,
Yeah. No, it's AIDS.
It's AIDS, buddy.
Yeah.
And, just because they tried to spin it as a heart attack for the sake of like, oh, yeah, protecting his
legacy, reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the movie ends with Scott attending the funeral service, and then he goes into this sort of fantasy of seeing him perform on stage.
Yeah.
Where he like gives the same monologue that I gave at the beginning of this episode, except without the Neon Crew podcast being a part of it. I wish it was. Would have been a G if he did that, but sadly we didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And then the performance ends, he like soars up into the rafters. He like floats on up. And then it cuts to Scott in the pew of the church service where the funeral is. And it just sort of like lingers on him giving like this sort of quaint little smile. And then that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like a bad ending. It's just, it's one that is not very much in line with the rest of the film.
Well,
because like it feels like everything up to that point is like so absurd and like comedic and just kind of like dryly displayed, whereas like this is like one of the only times in the movie where it feels like weirdly sentimental, right?
Not to say only, because we did talk about there are moments in all of the relationship that we saw that they have moments of them being together,
for sure,
and
yeah,
and I think so. There's to play devil's advocate with it, because I agree. I thought the ending is kind of, it's supposed to be a little bit whimsical and touching and sentimental, and I think if we're going off of it, there's literal train of thought and then maybe a figurative train of thought. Literal is this is based off a book, Behind the Candelabra, written by Scott. So I mean, that may have ended it like in the book,
right?
May have ended that way, where because Liberace did call him back, and I think they had kind of a little bit of a reconnection or a forgiveness, if you will, of the
sort of like what's that term, like bridge over troubled water. So like what
whatever they
they
crossed it and they forgave each other for everything, and it sounded like Lee took, like, he didn't call all his other lovers back, so I think that phone call to Scott really showed that he genuinely did care about him at some point.
Water over the bridge. That's what.
There you go.
That's the term I was looking for.
Nice.
Thank you. My brain is loading very slowly.
Processing rates down. So there's that aspect of it. And the other aspect is kind of leaning into that is that it's a look at maybe what their love was, and that they genuinely did care about each other. And if it's through his eyes, maybe he always thought Lee did care about him like that. I mean, it's damning to say, but he did adopt him, and they did have...
That's right. He did love him like a son.
Like there is the weirdest form of love there is out there. But
it's still love, damn it.
Yeah, and that relationship, and maybe that's where that wry smile comes from of, at the end of the day, we had our differences, and it may not have gone down. And because, so after he passed, Thorson dropped he dropped it leading up to it, because I think he knew a little bit more ahead than what the movie shows.
Yeah,
he dropped the palimony, suing him, and went for conversion of property. And that's he said because Lee was dying and he didn't want to drag it out while he was going through it. So, and that too says something about someone, because I mean, hey, I don't give a shit if he's dying or not. He owes me fucking money,
right?
You know what I'm saying? And there's another version of, okay, like we'll move on. Let's move past this. And that usually shows that you still have some feelings or connection with, what you're dealing with. So I think that's maybe where it was going for. But I do agree with you. I do agree with you, though. I mean, it's a little after the way the relationship ends, and the toxicness and everything that built up, and how absurd this whole situation is you feel like they have a little bit different of an ending.
And like I said, I don't hate it. Right. I think it's a decent ending.
Yeah.
It's one that, like, compared to the rest of the film, little bit more disconnected than the rest. But,
yes. Agreed.
That's
I agree
pretty
with
much
that.
it.
Yeah.
Was there anything else we wanted to talk about with Behind the Candelabra? I feel like I was a lot more productive on that topic of conversation than I was for A Complete Unknown.
Well, the Complete Unknown is... And I enjoyed it very much, but there's not a whole lot to bite off.
Yeah.
Unless you really know about folk music, about Dylan's history.
It's unknown. You don't know.
This movie's just fun.
This movie is fun.
Absurd.
Yeah.
The dialogue is snappy.
I kind of wish I had watched it with Megan because I know she would have gotten a kick out of this.
Oh, I watched it with Jasmine, and she was like, she was studying, and head would snap up at certain points, and then she'd go to the kitchen, and you just hear her go, "Wow, that is fascinating."
Mm-hmm.
And you just can't, and that's why I was asking. I was like, I asked her about, like, I don't want to say derogatory terms. I was like, I don't know what's, like, not to say allowed to say or not, but, like, I don't want to offend anyone. And but fun. I just kept falling back on that of like, well, that suits everyone.
Yeah.
They embellish the lifestyle that he's living. They show him what he's like. I am a showman. I have $110 million. You're gonna see what it's like to have this type of ego.
Oh yeah.
And you're
gonna live in it.
They do it up.
They do it up. Shall we get into ratings then?
Yes.
I guess I'm going first for this one. Very enjoyable. I'm glad you recommended it. Really found myself entertained throughout. Able to recognize the sort of goal of this film, not just like thematically, but also just on a technical level. The really great way this movie's framed. The use of silence when scenes call for it. The use of music when he's on stage. The performances are great. This is a very fucking solid, unique musical biopic. So this is an 8 out of 10 for me.
Nice.
8 candles on the piano.
8 out of 10 out of the Candelabra.
Mm-hmm.
This thing's fun. It's poppy. It's the dialogue's fantastic. I mean, it's a very unique film given the subject matter, but the performances are great. I don't think there's a dull moment in this thing, No,
I was never bored.
No. And you don't need a whole lot of crazy cinematography going to keep you in it, I think it speaks for itself to have the score even disappear and not even recognize that there's nothing playing with what's going on. And I mean, just for these two to hold the film up for as long as they did, it's fantastic. Ending's all right, and I don't think that takes away from anything. This is is an ingrained 8 out of 10 for me. It's not
nice.
Yeah, I'd say it's close to a 9 out of 10 for some reason. I don't know if being released on Max makes it feel like a straight to DVD type movie.
It's crazy though, because this movie had like a pretty proper budget. It was $23 million.
Yes.
I think I read that he shot it in like a month, which I guess that's sort of Soderbergh's thing. He likes to shoot movies pretty fucking quick.
Yes.
So why he's able to make so many of them, I guess. But yeah, this is like a real ass movie.
Yeah,
they just didn't want to put it out because they thought it was too gay.
Well, and I wonder if it was on the screen, if I went to a theater to see it versus just straight
just on your TV.
If that impacts my opinion on it at all.
I think this would have played pretty nicely in a theater.
Yeah,
honestly, there's a few straight to streaming movies that I have that feeling towards, but that is neither here nor there. Have you seen a preview for Soderbergh's next movie, Black Bag?
I don't think I have.
No? Be curious what you think of that. I'm kind of looking forward to it because it's Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett, and it's like a husband and wife spy espionage movie.
I want to say I did then, because that sounds so familiar. I bet you I have.
The trailer itself, I thought was like, eh. The movie on its own and the premise and who's in it, makes me want to watch it.
3 tight. I mean, you got Soderbergh directing with Fassbender and Blanchett.
Foss hanging dong Bender.
Shame Bender.
Shame Bender.
Dude, There's two ways to go about going to a sex shop and experiencing a glory hole. You have shame, and then you have behind the candelabra.
Yep.
One of them depicts it in a really dirty manner, and one of them makes it really fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd ever be able to say that.
It makes it a little goofy.
Lee, what are you doing down there? She's peeking up from the fucking doorway.
I love how he's like trying to get into one of the doors, and the guy's like, "Yo, what the fuck?"
Yeah. He's like,
"Hey, I'm trying to jerk it here."
We're gonna try some new things, Lee. Lee.
I love how he just like fucking stumbles into the shop, and they've both got their like fur coats and like they just stick out like sore thumbs.
And then, oh my God. And then they have to have a conversation about it afterwards.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Movie's great.
We have to discuss of what transpired. And it's not the fact that they went to a sex shop or were doing that. It's that he could get caught.
This movie's awesome. It's a 12 out of 10. Yeah. What are we doing?
Dude. So much. Oh my God. Yes. Oh my. Thank you. Okay. Finally, someone else has seen it now that you can bask in the glory. Because it's I never get to talk about it enough, and I always reference it and everyone. And then you got to get nervous because it's like, if you get uncomfortable, you'll be really uncomfortable during this thing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, like there's a risk of like if you show this to someone, they'll be like, I didn't like that at all.
Yeah,
like, that is not my type of movie.
No.
And it's like you and me are a couple of fucking freaks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But it's like, no, this thing is like insane.
Yeah. You know what? I'm glad we feel the same way about this.
Yeah.
It would be hard if we were like, I was like, I'm not on board for Behind the Candelabra. I thought it was like a perverse little...
That's what I'm saying. Like, dude, and I didn't even... Like, Bob Black in this thing. Scott Bakula is so fantastic.
He's good. He's not in the movie that much, but he's so naturally just like in the pocket.
When he's just floating around in there.
That great mustache.
Yeah. Oh, and then, and they're sitting there by the pool. It's like, everyone's treating me like an outsider. Like, what is going on? Is there something going on with me? And then he like looks, he goes, yeah. Well, he doesn't even like church it up.
A great thing that this movie does too is like, you're just able to tell what type of character they are just based on their look.
Yeah.
Like you can just look at them and be like, oh yeah, this is this type of person. This is like Dan Aykroyd is this. Like this fucking like slightly scuzzy manager. Fucking Liberace's obviously like loud and absurd and just like flamboyant.
Yes.
And then like Matt Damon's look, how that changes throughout the movie. It's like, yeah, a clear indication of like who these characters are just physically.
I mean, and that's a great point too. Now to think about like Matt Damon and seeing him, like if you had a dependent variable and an independent variable, the dependent variable being Liberace, who's holding steady with his character, right? And he's up here with his antics and his just how over the top he is. But you get to see that independent variable with Damon going from, like you said, the beginning of the film was just, I'm going to be a veterinarian. And you better watch out. They think you're a giant chew toy. I'm calling 911. I'm calling 911. Hello? Who the fuck is this?
I'm not going to call him.
Yeah.
So then don't.
Yeah.
You son of a bitch. You selfish asshole.
It's Nicky Cat. So just doing blow. Like it's like whatever. They're watching the fucking the Oscars.
Yeah.
And it's also great too because he gets kicked out and like even his like little apartment has got the mirrors everywhere and you can see it's totally decked out guest house, right? Mm-hmm. And then they go. And he's at Nicky Cat's house, and they're sitting on a couch, and it's got like the shag carpet, and then they got the one TV right there, right in the middle that's wheeled out. That's probably half the size of however many TVs Lee had in his house, and you just see like he's totally out of his environment, right? Like totally out of his environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great fucking movie. Thanks for recommending. Speaking of recommendations, that's the last bit of business we have before we wrap this episode up. So it's my turn to recommend a movie. This is one that I've had on my list to recommend for quite some time, but I've held off because it was not available to watch anywhere.
Oh.
Like I'd look it up and be like, can I stream it? Can I rent it? Can I find it for free anywhere?
Yeah.
No. But I think a few months ago, they had put it on Netflix, and it's still on there. So I'm going to recommend this movie because we're able to watch it and talk about it.
Okay.
It is a 1988 animated Japanese film.
Howl's Moving Castle.
Close. It is Studio Ghibli. It was not directed by Hayao Miyazaki.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep. It's a bit more on the depressing side from what...
Right up your alley?
From what I could understand.
Dour, dour, dour.
Uh-huh.
I can't wait.
Sadness.
The complete opposite of what we just saw.
Pretty much, yeah. Figured we, hit the curb.
Yeah.
Head towards a tonal shift.
We got to balance this back out.
It is directed by Aizo Takahata.
Okay.
I believe is how you pronounce that. And it is more specifically an animated historical war drama.
Is it oh god, I just saw the Fireflies?
Yep, Grave of the Fireflies.
Yes. Oh my, of course. I was just, oh my god. So we'll watch it. I just want to say this. I'm on Facebook, right? And I'm always trying to kind of like, if I see a movie thing, it's like, oh, I want, like, let me read about this. Is it something that I need to check out? We need to talk about whatever. Fucking someone in there, like 5 images, right? Because that's how you get on like the collage,
Yeah.
And then it says movies I recommend to anyone anytime I talk to them. It's freaking Old Boy, The Burning, the Come and See.
Yeah.
It's the very first image, and I'm like, so I'm looking at it, I was like, oh, that's Come and See, and I was like, that's Old Boy. I was like, what the fuck is this person recommending? So I click on it. Requiem for a Dream's in there, like all like the Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Yeah, like the most depressing ass
Sophie's
shit you could ever
Choice.
think of.
Yeah, and I'm like looking at this, like, what the hell? And guess what movie was in there?
Grave of the Fireflies.
Only reason why, as soon as you said that, off the backdrop of World War II, I was like, I saw the image and I saw that the title. I was like, that's interesting, because I had. When Blockbuster went out, me and Sam and some friends went and bought. How they'd have the thing for the movies, the poster kind of what they'd set up, and behind the movies they'd have the poster image of it. So if the movie ran out, you would be
like
able
the
to,
little placard that said like, "Hey, this is where this movie would be if the disc was here."
No, it's just it's like a cardboard cutout of the poster. It's like literally like this big.
Okay, yeah.
And they'd have it behind it. So like in the section, they'd have 8 rows of the film, right? And so if one ran out and you were walking by and didn't know what you were seeing, you'd be able to see that this little placard was showing like the poster of the movie. It's just like a little, like they went, like 11 by 8 with it.
Mm-hmm.
And Grave of the Fireflies was one that I nabbed, and so I've always had it in the back of my mind. So every time I can't quite remember it, but I'm always like, oh yeah, I remember I wanted to see this. I didn't know what it was about, and then I saw it pop up on this list, and I laughed today, and I was like, oh, okay, like maybe it's a good thing I've never seen it.
So you haven't seen this movie.
I have not seen this movie. This is and
this will be a fresh.
Only imagine what we're about to walk into.
A fresh discovery for the both of us, because I haven't seen it either.
The Japanese film on some of the anime it's lost. I mean, it's kind of like a
right. I'm trying to like be better about it. I've watched like a few more Studio Ghibli movies. The past couple years. But this is one that was not Hayao Miyazaki,
right?
But is still Studio Ghibli. So I think it'll be a fairly easy transition for us.
Yeah,
and I'm excited to talk about it.
Right?
I think so. Akira.
Yeah, that's the other one that we got.
Yeah,
it's just one that gets popped. That it still comes up from time to time.
Yeah, I would rewatch Akira soon. Not exactly sure when. I have a buddy who's really into motorcycles.
Oh, okay.
And there's not that many great motorcycle movies. And that's one that I'm always telling him to check out because it's got a decent amount of motorcycle business in it that I think he'd appreciate.
If I remember correctly, that movie was it was not a drag, but there were some weird moments in it that kind of took you out.
It's I
don't know what they were going for.
It's very like heavy on some of the sci-fi horror elements of it.
Yeah.
But this one is supposed to be sad, so we're gonna talk about Grave of the Fireflies, and then we'll figure out a movie to pair it with Not feeling too picky about what we decide to watch next.
Sure, why not?
Well, we should probably avoid doing any of the Best Picture noms until we save it for the episode, right?
So I guess we've got one that we've talked about right now.
Yeah,
it's just a complete unknown.
A complete unknown.
Yeah.
Well, we did talk about Dune Part 2.
Oh yeah.
Right, but that was so long ago, and I'm sure we can.
Yeah, we'll be all right.
And fingers crossed, if we can maybe get a guest for the Oscars episode, offer some new perspective.
Yes. So it'd be perfect to get another side of things in here.
Yeah, instead of listening to us old biddies, Yeah. So anyway, if you guys don't want to be spoiled for Grave of the Fireflies, be sure to check that movie out. I believe it's still on Netflix before episode 89. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Neon Crew Podcast. You can find us on www.neoncrewpodcast.com. We're also on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and give us some 5-star ratings on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. Check out our Etsy page. We've got some sick, hot, delicious merch for you. Check out our social medias on Facebook community, Instagram, and YouTube community page as well. Shout out to Gideon for doing the music, and shout out to Lauren for doing the artwork. Keep a lookout for our upcoming special Oscars episode where we discuss the 10 Best Picture nominees. Looking forward to recording that with you, and hopefully, maybe, fingers crossed, not going to make any promises, surprise guests. So we'll see where that takes us. McLean, anything to say before we sign off?
WWTHD.
Bye, everyone.